Pillars. Okay, everybody. Ladies, thank you so much for being here, filling the space with your beautiful voices and laughter. And so lunch will keep you for the good part of the afternoon. There's something really satisfying about Southern food. And I can appreciate that because I grew up with Midwest food, and we won't do a program.
Well, you have the hot dishes and all that,
right? And pasties, if you're into that, tenderloin, right? So we are here to discuss Cheryl Day's new book, Cheryl Day's Treasury of Southern Baking. And it's already being called the new classic of Southern baking. So congratulations, Cheryl.
Thank you.
That is really exciting, and I love the Southern part of that. Yay! Yes! So I wanted to begin by setting the scene that looks a little bit familiar to those of us who live and love the marsh views, right? So if you open up this treasury of Southern baking, you see Cheryl gazing out at the South Carolina, Georgia coast. I don't know where the photo was taken.
Yeah.
Could have been anywhere along this coast.
It could have been anywhere. It was Wormslow, actually, in Savannah, and that's a rice field. So it was very, I don't know, it was just a very special moment, and she captured that photo, I think, beautifully.
She did. So this is a long way from Los Angeles, where you
It
grew
is.
up. Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so that's what this book is all about. That first page, it talks about I am definitely paying homage to my ancestors, and I give credit to the millions of enslaved Americans that came here, and I just didn't think I could write a Southern baking book without talking about the history and also talking about how we've evolved and how we're moving forward. But my personal history started with, I lost my mom when I was 22, and she left me this beautiful journal of letters and family history. And it starts out talking about my great-grandmother, Hannah Queen Grubbs, who was born enslaved about 1838, and she was a pastry cook, and I just found out that baking was truly in my DNA. Yeah. And so that's kind of the start of my personal journey. And it's funny, I tell people I've had that journal, obviously, a long time. I'm 60, so I had it since I was 22. But different times of my life, I would pick it up, and as you can imagine, it was emotional at times to look at it. But when I was researching this book, those particular letters really jumped off the page, and she was known for doing many of the things that I'm known for, biscuits, and one thing that really touched me, my mom described it as something she was known for, my grandmother, because there's been, obviously, these recipes have been passed down over the years and generations, but she was known for small cakes tinted in delightfully pastel colors, and I've become known for my old-fashioned cupcakes, which are literally the same thing, but she called them small cakes. We call them cupcakes. So yeah, that's where the book starts, and I just really wanted it to be a definitive book about Southern baking with all the different cultures that I see happening, from the different influences that I see happening in Southern culture, and that's where I'm talking about it evolving. But I thought it was really important to talk about where it started. And so that's where I start in this book.
So what are some of your earliest memories of being in the kitchen?
Oh, definitely with my grandmother, my mom's mom in Alabama. And my mom would send me every summer from Los Angeles, and I would spend the summer with my grandmother, and I just really fell in love with Southern culture. I just thought it was fascinating how much she was a part of the community. She would bake, 2 loaves and take one to a neighbor, and she would go to multiple farmers markets just to create one meal. And I also love the Southern hospitality and that kind of comforting elegance, the way that she would set a table just to have a meal, a regular, weekday meal there. She would set her table with her beautiful linens, and you sat down to the table and that hot bread was brought out, and I just fell in love with just that whole experience. I think my mom realized, and what I've come to realize is that so many recipes have been lost. I mean, in many cultures, but especially in Black culture, it seems to be that recipes were oral histories. And if you don't stand, I always like to encourage people, if you have someone older in your life, or if you're older and you have a granddaughter, to share these recipes that you have that have been passed down in your family, because they'll be gone. And this was my way. This book basically pays homage to a lot of the women that I believe created Southern baking, but also just to get people back into the kitchen again, and also to raise the level of what Southern baking is. I think so many of my colleagues are doing more European style baking and croissants, but I think a biscuit needs to be held high. And especially if you make a biscuit that's got beautiful flaky layers. I have three recipes for biscuits in the book, and I say, how many biscuit recipes are there? People always ask me, and how many grandmothers are there? I love them all. I mean, there's just so many different ways that you could make a biscuit, but I wanted this book to really elevate Southern baking with, a lot of folks out in the world don't realize that it is very special what we do here in the South.
Mm-hmm, it is. So did you take a segue while you were out on the West Coast after taking the summers to visit your grandma in Alabama and veer into some new fusion? I mean, we've been through some really weird eras of food, haven't we?
Yeah.
And did you come back to the roots of Southern baking, or have you always been there?
No, I mean, I feel that it was kind of always my, my personal history, but growing up in Southern California, I found a juxtaposition. I really think there's a lot of similarities that people don't think about, because in Southern California, we also do cook seasonally and bake seasonally. There's great farmers markets. My parents belong to a co-op, and so there is that very similar aspect. I love the way there's a different style, I think, that I got as a Southern California baker. It's very textural, but I really do see a lot of similarities in the style. But what happened was, when my husband and I moved to Savannah, I was starting to see other bakeries were just really focusing on European style breads and croissants, and I love all those things. And we, in the beginning, were doing some of those things. My husband still does beautiful baguettes and, a lot of French influence. But we decided that we really saw our niche to be, what can we do? Basically everything we do, we give a Southern spin. And so that's what we do.
At what point then did the love and interest in food, and I love, don't you love just imagining grandma's table being set with the linens? I got such a visual of that, and it was so sweet, and I love linens. So at what point did you say, I'm going to make this my life? Yeah. You're a cookbook author, you own a bakery, you and your husband are entrepreneurs. Is it a career? Is it a calling? Is it all of the above?
Yeah, I feel like it's all of the above. I definitely, like I said, when I opened those letters from my, my family history, I definitely saw it as a calling for sure. I definitely believe I'm doing my life's work. And I feel very privileged to be sharing this story and to share the story of, my ancestors that came before me and all of the Southern bakers that came before us. But I really feel that I just really wanted to do, my husband and I moved to Savannah after 9/11, and we were both kind of doing totally different jobs. But we decided that we really wanted to do something that we were really passionate about. And I know you can relate to that. And we wanted to do that full time. And so we decided to, and I should mention, my husband and I are both self-taught bakers. We learned from baking. A few years ago, we were both nominated for a James Beard Award, which we were very proud of because we're self-taught. We didn't go to a fancy culinary school, and not that I have anything against that, but we definitely learned from making. And so with the cookbooks, I really love to teach, and that's something I see myself doing in the future. And I think that it's opened me up to a wider audience of folks that I can share these recipes with and really make baking approachable, and just to let people see that if you can definitely make it, as long as you have patience and just do it time and time again.
If you love
You
it,
can make those biscuits.
Yeah, I will. After today, I'm going to try buttermilk biscuits.
Lunch, by the way, was that not delicious?
Thank you. What a great
much.
recipe. So, has anybody here read the 1619 Project? Yeah.
Not yet.
Okay, Cast.
Want to.
Has anybody read Isabel Wilkerson's
No, but I hope
Cast?
you have it here because
We
I
have
need
a
to read
book.
it. Okay.
Yeah, both. And I was thinking, Cheryl, as I
I was
read
writing this book and I could not read another book
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
Cast came out.
Oh, I
but,
bet.
yeah.
Well, so
Yeah.
what we learn about the telling of history,
Mhm.
right, is that the source material wasn't there
Right.
for a lot of African American stories.
Right.
There weren't the books written. They weren't published.
Mhm.
So we see, they were sermons. They were, and so in your world of food and Southern food and coming from enslaved people,
Mhm.
I could see how the journal
Mhm.
is precious.
Oh, it's priceless. There's a few pages of some of my mother's handwriting in the beginning of the book. Someone asked me recently if that's something that I would publish. And I don't know. I don't think so. It's really personal, obvious to me, obviously. But I just think, yeah. And another thing is, like, my great grandmother, she didn't learn how to read or write until she was in her 50s. And that was very common. So a lot of the recipes, they were cooking, Black women were cooking in the kitchens, but they didn't get credit. Obviously, someone else wrote them down, and yeah.
Yeah. So in researching you for your books and telling this story,
Yes.
what other source material did
Oh
you have?
gosh. So when the word got out that I was doing a Southern baking book, I just really wanted to reach out. It started out that I knew it was going to be a comprehensive book. I didn't want it to necessarily just be my story. It kind of took a turn and became my very personal story. But when the word got out, I started like church and community cookbooks, those awesome cookbooks.
Oh,
I would
yeah,
piles
of
of them would literally just show up on my doorstep. And those I found to be a great resource because these are, I would say mostly women, written by women who took their writing these recipes very seriously in the church. Or in, the different communities. And, these are women that will never know who they are. So I just was fascinated reading recipes over and over again, seeing some similarities, finding new recipes that I had never really experienced or heard of. But there were many that were very similar little things that I just was fascinated by. And I do have to say, I have a very big cookbook collection myself.
Tell us about some of the
I
prized
can't
pieces.
stop myself. Well, some of those church and community cookbooks definitely have a high place in my heart, but I have Edna Lewis's cookbooks. Some of the first cookbooks are definitely my favorites. And then just a lot of old Southern books about pickles or jams and just putting up. And I could just literally obviously I did. I spent a lot of time in that library. But I wanted this book to be, I just wanted it to be as comprehensive, and someone, Bon Appetit, just called it the definitive cookbook on Southern baking, and I just thought, oh wow, that's really
Yay.
yeah.
That is something else.
Yeah.
So tell us some of the tips that we'll find in here, because you've had the good fortune to cook with your mother and your grandmother,
Yeah.
to learn the things. Sometimes you can only learn by doing, right? And
Right.
so what's the secret of the Southern
Well, I'll
biscuit?
say this though, my husband is from Minneapolis.
Good, there's hope.
Yeah, and he definitely, his specialty is bread and different things, and I definitely specialize in the biscuits and all of that. But I think really it is a lot of practice makes perfect. I mean, people that bake, take notes, see, all ovens are not created equal. A recipe is definitely a great guideline, but if your kitchen is hot or cold, these are all things you just have to really be in tune to your senses. But for the most part, I want folks to realize that you don't have to be living in the South or be from the South, obviously, to be a Southern baker. And, these are recipes that I think would find a great place in anyone's repertoire. The chocolate cake is amazing in this cookbook. But, as far as tips, I would say practice makes perfect. My mom always used to say that. But this is one of those crafts that it is so true. Even with decorating cakes, I used to be terrible at decorating cakes. I just was so hard on myself. But I really do love, I came up with my own style where it looks very, you can see the hand, work. You can see the whole love that goes into decorating the cake. But I decided that I wanted to learn how to do, and are some pictures in here of Buttercream Roses. And that was something that I had to teach myself. Yeah. And they were awful. They were just awful until I just, kept going. And then finally, I had something that I was proud of. There's several gateway, as people call it, recipes in the book. I think the cat head biscuits, if you don't want to do it's drop biscuit, basically. If you don't want to get out your rolling pin and, roll and cut, if that's intimidating, then you could just easily make a drop biscuit, and you can make them sweet or savory. And there's lots of cookies. there's literally, I didn't want anyone to think of a recipe that wasn't in this book. I can't think of a single recipe that I left out.
Wow, that's impressive. Isn't it impressive? So when you and Griff have a special occasion, like your anniversary,
Right.
You both do that. You like being in the kitchen.
Yeah.
What do you cook for one another?
Oh gosh, Griff is an excellent savory cook. One of my favorite things he does is fresh vegetables grilled, served over rice or something, really, really simple. But we do love to cook at home. Griff is much better at it than I am. But baking, I still love to make pies and chicken pot pie at home. I think there's a lot of little tricks that you can do. You could certainly make pot pie. You could put it in the freezer and, bake it off later. I think a lot of times people don't think about that. You could make cookie dough and scoop it and put it in the freezer and then you just have a hankering for 2 cookies, pull out 2 cookie balls and bake those off, so.
I think Gigi was the one who said earlier, she thought chicken pot pie was only available frozen. I remember that Swanson's in a little tin at my house. Yeah. Okay, so let's, I have a couple more questions, then we're going to open it up.
Sure.
Let's talk about racial justice,
Okay.
because you've started a
Surge.
special group, the Southern Restaurants for Racial Justice.
We shortened Surge.
Surge, okay.
Shortened.
Tell us about it.
So, with 2 other pastry chef friends of mine, they approached me actually during the pandemic, and also when there was so much social unrest in this country. And they said, what can we do to, make a difference right now? And to be honest, I was a little overwhelmed, because this was when we were all sitting around, watching TV and stuck at home, and it just seemed like it would never end, right? But between the pandemic and everything else, but we started this organization, Southern Restaurants for Racial Justice. And what we did was we approached all of our friends in the restaurant industry, Southern restaurants, and it was really a daunting task at first, because here we were all kind of struggling, our businesses, as you mentioned, holding your breath. But fortunately, all of these restaurants, so support restaurants, I tell you, because they wanted to do something. And all of our friends agreed to give whatever they could, whether it was meals or a percentage of sales. And we raised for the first bake sale that we did, we raised $100,000 in the weekend. And and we decided to donate to an organization that we thought would give back, to the Black community. But after that, we wanted to take it a step further and really help Black-owned restaurants all over. It's actually turned into all over the country, because in marginalized communities, I think it's so important for people to know that, people say, well, why just Black restaurants? Well, unfortunately, they didn't have the same resources. They weren't able to go to a bank or to get through COVID and to get through all of these things. They just simply did not have the resources. And we thought this would be a good way to give grants back. Well, we were very fortunate. We teamed up with the Lee Initiative, Edward Lee. I'm sure you have his books, yeah. And they partnered with us to handle the money that we were going to give to the grants. And as a part of that, Heinz Ketchup Corporation gave us $1 million. So we were able to give 71 Black-owned businesses all over the country these grants. Some got 20,000. And then we also had a relief fund. There was the oldest Black-owned restaurant in the country that burned down in Arkansas. It was a barbecue place. And we were able to give them a relief grant for $25,000. And he's told us that even after all these years that he's been open, he could not get any money anywhere else. So anyway, so now we're going to see what's next. But that was really very impactful to keep these restaurants alive in these neighborhoods, because everyone needs to have, community.
And food does that.
And food does bring people together.
Who's got a question for Cheryl? Yes, Mansai.
Hi. Let me just start with a thank you for doing this.
Oh, and what's your name?
Munsell.
Oh, pretty name.
Thank you. As I was listening to this extraordinary story, and so what you've done for those of us who are Southern cooks and bakers is you've let us in on the real history of where our food comes from. And I'm really grateful you did that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
I was seeing a parallel between this and the Netflix show High on the Hog.
Yes, yes.
It's like
Yes, wasn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Magnificently
Yeah,
done.
Dr. Jessica Harris, actually, I don't know if you noticed, but she gave me a beautiful endorsement on the back of the book.
Oh.
I mean, she calls it a masterpiece. I was like,
Oh.
and she's so, I just revere her so much, but
She was lovely.
Yeah.
And for anybody who has not seen that, it's this beautifully
it is.
filmed, almost poetic
It is gorgeous.
understanding of where American food comes from.
Right.
And not all American food, not just
Yeah.
not barbecue, not soul
Right,
food,
right.
all American food
Mm-hmm.
we owe to the people that we brought here.
Yeah.
And I just think that's essential knowledge that we have.
Yeah.
And you just added you put another layer on the cake.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's I love that series. And the crazy thing is she wrote that book over 20 years ago. And
Really?
yeah. And now it was just, I think this was the first time she made the New York Times bestsellers list because of the Netflix series, but such a beautiful story.
Yeah.
And facts.
Yeah.
Facts.
Yeah. Facts in history. Anybody else? Hi.
Hi, I'm Ann.
Hi, Ann.
I just have maybe a comment, but
Sure.
thank you for sharing about your own self-doubt as you were pursuing decorating, for
Oh.
example. I think we were chatting about, not even wanting to try because, I can't make from scratch, but I can't use a prepared pie crust.
Right.
Why not?
Right on.
So it's that, I don't know if you have met even among your colleagues that sort of the fear, the weight of expectation, the search for perfection,
Right.
when perfection should be about love,
Right. Exactly.
not blemish free.
Right.
And so I don't know if you want to comment on some of those.
Yeah, no, I agree
Journey.
with that. That's more my philosophy is I think there's such beauty in imperfections. I mean, first of all, I've always felt that way. I love collecting vintage. I just think, something that has history is just so much more special. But yeah, food is love. So it shouldn't be about, icing a cake absolutely perfect. What really is, seeking perfection. It's going to be delicious. It's time well spent, whether it's, with someone making it or even just for yourself. To make something and to share it and to enjoy it is much more important than seeking that perfection, which does not exist.
And prevents us from.
And prevents you from starting. Yeah.
Exactly.
I just want people to get into the kitchen. That's why I've got so many recipes in here that any level of baker could certainly make. And, you don't have to, I say pick out a few that you can master. Don't start with, something that would be daunting and set yourself up for failure. Like, yes, there's a 12-layer cake in here, but, but if you read the recipe, though, I did say, do yourself, I think I literally say that, do yourself a favor and get 12 disposable pans. I mean, why would you want to go through the stress of cutting a cake, into layers? It's going to fall apart. You're going to be crying. So just do yourself a favor and get those disposable pans, but don't do that first. Work up to it. I mean, don't say I'm going to master. I mean, if you're going to master the flaky butter biscuits, great. But, give yourself some grace and just start and see where the journey takes you. I mean, I'm telling you about my personal journey, but see where it takes you from start to, every day. Literally tomorrow I'll be throwing biscuits at the bakery, and every day I'm wanting them to be better than they were, the last time I made them. So, but
Cheryl, there's a word that you use over and over
what's
in
that?
this book, and it's evolve.
Oh,
And today, have you noticed that Cheryl has said that too? And I just have had in getting to know you today, beyond reading your words, it feels like your gift is beyond food. It's about certainly the history of food and learning more about that. But it's also a woman's story.
It is.
And I'm picking up the beauty and the imperfection of these lifelong lessons, you know, these things that we've struggled with from high school on, that love this chicken pot pie that's, the crust is sliding down the side of the crock. Because rustic is good and imperfection is beautiful.
I love that you said it's a woman's story. I mean, obviously it's my story. It's definitely a woman's story, though. You'll see sprinkled throughout. I have quotes from the first one in the beginning of the book, Harriet Tubman. There's a beautiful quote. And I have quotes from, you know, women that have inspired me. And I just think that, this is a woman's, you know, work. And it was definitely about evolving, for sure.
Well, before we close, any more questions, comments, quips? Yes.
Hey.
Jenna.
Hi, my name's Jenna. I was wondering, what is your favorite recipes out of your cookbook and the back in the day one?
Let's see. That's really a difficult
Who's your
question.
favorite child?
Your favorite child.
But, you know, and I know people always say that, you know, it's like answering, but I'll answer it this way. I'll say, because someone asked me recently this way, what is the one that I think is the most me, the most Cheryl Day? I would say the chocolate church cake in this book. And I would say the most sentimental is the lemon meringue pie from the Back in the Day Bakery cookbook. And, but in general, I think the one that is right in front of me on the plate is my absolute favorite.
That's beautiful. Cheryl Day, thank you so much for
Oh,
joining us.
thanks for having me. Thank you. And I have to add, this is such a special place, and I am just so, you can just feel the love in this space. And, you know, from Rebecca and her kitchen team and
Thank you.
and to you. And I just think it's just you can tell it's a really special place. So you all are lucky, and thanks
you,
for us supporting, you know, these small businesses that you have.
Absolutely. So, makes a great gift. You want an extra